Can you imagine hearing these words? Those were the last words my mother said to me before she shoved me into a January blizzard and locked the door behind me. Get out. Get out. I don't have a daughter. I was 16 years old. I had no coat, no phone, no money, just a school backpack with biology homework inside, and snow already soaking through my sneakers. 3 hours later, the hospital called her, and when she heard what they said, her face went white as the snow that almost killed me. But by then, it was way too late. I'm Jennifer Rice. I'm 29 now, sitting in my Seattle apartment watching rain slide down the window. There's a letter on my kitchen table, shaky handwriting on cheap prison stationery. After 13 years of silence, my brother wants to see me, says he's sorry, says he finally wants to tell the truth. Funny thing about cold weather, it always takes me back to that night, January 17th, 2012. I remember coming home from school like it was any other Tuesday, backpack over one shoulder, head full of the biology tests I'd just aced. I was thinking about dinner, about homework, about the concert tickets I was saving up for. Normal 16-year-old stuff. I had absolutely no idea that in less than 2 hours, I'd be walking alone through a freezing blizzard, wondering if I was going to survive the night. The moment I stepped through that front door, I knew something was wrong. My mother was standing in the living room looking like a volcano about to explode. Her face was the color of raw meat, her hands were shaking, and she was holding my grandmother's pearl necklace in one fist and a small plastic bag in the other. My brother Kyle stood right behind her. He was 20, 4 years older than me, and he had this expression on his face. Concerned, worried, heartbroken. The perfect picture of a devoted older brother who just discovered something terrible about his little sister. But I saw his eyes. I caught that little flicker he couldn't quite hide. Satisfaction. My mother didn't even let me put down my backpack. She started screaming like I'd burned the house down. She said I'd been stealing family jewelry for months. She said I'd been selling it online to buy drugs. She said Kyle had found the evidence. Pearls hidden in my dresser, weed in my closet, screenshots of sales listings with my email address. I tried to explain. I tried to tell her I'd never touched Grandma's jewelry, never seen those drugs, didn't even know what she was talking about. But the words died in my throat because I realized something horrible. She wasn't listening. Her mind was already made up. Kyle had spent the whole day preparing her, feeding her lies like poison wrapped in sugar. He stood there looking devastated, telling her he tried so hard to help me, tried to get me to stop. He said he hadn't wanted to tell her, but he just couldn't watch his little sister destroy herself anymore. It was a masterpiece performance, Academy Award worthy, and my mother swallowed every single word like it was gospel truth. She grabbed my arm hard enough to leave bruises and dragged me toward the front door. My backpack was right there where I dropped it. She picked it up and threw it at my chest so hard I stumbled backward. Then she opened the door. Snow was already coming down in sheets, wind howling like something alive and angry. The temperature had dropped to 8 below zero. Wind chill made it feel like 17 below. And my mother looked me dead in the eyes and said those words again. Get out. I don't have a daughter. She pushed me onto the porch, the door slammed, the deadbolt clicked, and just like that, at 16 years old, I was homeless in a Minnesota blizzard. I stood on that porch for maybe 3 minutes before the cold started to hurt. Not just uncomfortable, actually painful. The kind of cold that makes you understand, really understand that weather can kill you. My sneakers were already soaked through. My hoodie was meant for walking from the car to the school building, not surviving a winter storm. I kept waiting for the door to open again, waiting for someone to say it was all a big misunderstanding. Nobody came. My phone was sitting on my bedroom desk. I wasn't allowed to grab anything except what was already in my hands. My backpack had textbooks, a half-eaten granola bar, and absolutely nothing useful for surviving a night outside. No jacket, no money, no way to call for help. So I started walking. I didn't make a conscious decision about where to go. My body just moved on autopilot toward the only safe place I knew, my Uncle Marshall's house, 9 miles away. My father's brother, the one person who always looked at me like I mattered. 9 miles doesn't sound like much when you're driving. When you're walking through a blizzard in canvas sneakers with no coat, it might as well be 90. County Road 4 stretched ahead of me, dark and buried in snow. Cars crawled past without slowing down. I was just a shadow in the whiteout, a shape nobody wanted to look at too closely. After the first mile, my clothes were soaked through to my skin. After the second mile, I couldn't feel my fingers anymore. After the third mile, my teeth were chattering so hard I thought they might crack. But I kept walking. What else could I do? Go back and beg my mother to believe me? She'd already made up her mind. I had nowhere else to go except forward, one numb step at a time. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, please subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I see everything. Thank you so much for your support. Now, to understand what happened that night, to really understand why my brother did what he did, I need to take you back to when everything started falling apart. My father, Garrett Rice, died in 2008. Heart attack. He was 45 years old. I was 12. One day, I had a dad who taught me to fish and helped me with math homework and called me his girl. The next day, I was standing by a hospital bed watching machines beep slower and slower until they stopped altogether. Here's what most people don't know about my family. Patricia, my mother, isn't my biological mother. Well, she is, but Garrett wasn't my biological father. My real father was some guy who disappeared before I was born. Patricia was a 22-year-old waitress raising me alone when she met Garrett. He was a widower with an 8-year-old son named Kyle. They got married when I was 4. Garrett adopted me legally 6 months later. From that day forward, Garrett treated me like I was his blood. No difference between me and Kyle, at least not from him. He came to my school plays, sitting in the front row with the camera that was always running out of battery at the worst moments. He taught me to ride a bike in the driveway, running alongside me until I found my balance. He sat with me when I had nightmares about monsters under the bed, telling me that no monster would dare come into a house where he lived. He was my dad in every way that mattered. I remember one afternoon when I was 7. I'd made a Father's Day card at school, and I was nervous to give it to him because some kid had told me that adopted dads weren't real dads. Garrett took one look at that card with its crooked letters and too much glitter, and his eyes got wet. Picked me up and said, "You know what makes a real dad? Showing up, and I'm going to show up for you every single day for the rest of my life." He meant it. He really meant it. And for 8 years, he kept that promise. But Kyle never saw it that way. To him, I was the intruder, the stranger who showed up and started stealing his father's attention. He was 8 years old when I came into his life, old enough to remember when he had his dad all to himself, old enough to resent the little girl who changed that. What nobody saw, what Garrett absolutely refused to see, was what happened when he wasn't looking. Kyle wasn't just resentful, he was calculating, and in his mind, I was a problem that needed to be eliminated. It started small. Toys that mysteriously broke, homework that disappeared the night before it was due, my favorite stuffed animal found in the trash. Little things that could be explained away as accidents or childhood carelessness. But I knew, even at 6, 7, 8 years old, I knew Kyle was doing it on purpose. I just couldn't prove it. I tried to tell my mother once. She laughed. "Kyle loves you," she said. "He's your big brother. Stop being so dramatic." After that, I learned to keep my mouth shut. Stay small, stay quiet, survive until I could get out. Then Garrett died and everything changed. My father was a planner. Even before he got sick, he was thinking about the future, about what would happen to me if he wasn't around. He'd seen how Patricia treated me when he wasn't looking. Little comments, small cruelties, the way her face changed when she thought no one was watching. He never confronted her about it. That wasn't his way. But he prepared. 2 months before his heart attack, Garrett took out a life insurance policy. Not for Patricia, not for Kyle, for me. $95,000, held in trust until I turned 21. He also called his younger brother Marshall, a family lawyer in Minneapolis, and told him something that Marshall didn't share with me until years later. Garrett said he was worried about me, said he didn't trust Patricia to take care of me if something happened. Said Kyle had a mean streak that Patricia refused to see. He made Marshall promise to keep an eye on me, to step in if things got bad. My father knew. He knew what would happen, and he tried to protect me the only way he could. The trust had a clause in it, a protection mechanism Garrett probably thought would help me. If I was declared legally incompetent or institutionalized before age 21, my share would be managed by a court-appointed guardian until I recovered. Garrett meant it as a safety net. Kyle saw it as an opportunity. After my father died, the lines were clearly drawn. Kyle was the golden child, the biological son, the one who could do no wrong. I was the charity case, the obligation, the girl Garrett had saddled Patricia with. And there was that money, $95,000, just sitting there waiting for me to turn 21. Kyle's life after high school was a disaster. He barely graduated with a 2.1 GPA and zero plan for the future. Couldn't hold a job for more than 3 months, got into online gambling and racked up $12,000 in debt by the time he was 19. His girlfriend Brittany had expensive tastes, Instagram aspirations, and zero income of her own. She wanted trips and jewelry and a lifestyle Kyle couldn't afford but kept promising anyway. By the time I was 16, Kyle owed money to credit card companies, a car dealership that was threatening to repossess his Mustang, and some people you really don't want to owe money to. He'd borrowed from our mother twice and never paid her back. He was desperate. My $95,000 was the solution to all his problems. If I got institutionalized, say for a drug addiction or criminal behavior, Patricia could petition the court to manage my trust, and Patricia would give Kyle whatever he wanted, because Patricia always gave Kyle whatever he wanted. She'd been doing it his whole life. $95,000. That's what I was worth to my brother. That's the price he put on my life. The week before he destroyed my life, Kyle put his plan into motion. Small details, carefully arranged. Brittany helped. She was 19, desperate to keep her meal ticket happy, willing to do whatever Kyle asked if it meant keeping their relationship intact. First, the jewelry. My grandmother's pearl necklace, the one Patricia kept in her closet. Kyle took it and hid it in my dresser drawer, buried under some old t-shirts where it would look like I was hiding it. Second, the drugs. Kyle bought a small amount of marijuana from someone he knew, planted it in my backpack's front pocket, the one I never used. Third, the digital trail. Brittany created fake listings on resale websites using my email address, posted photos of jewelry similar to my grandmother's pieces, made it look like I'd been selling stolen goods for months. Fourth, the messages. While I was sleeping, Brittany took my phone and sent texts to a number Kyle had set up. Messages about meeting up, about prices, about the next item I could get my hands on. Evidence of a drug dealer contact that didn't exist. On the morning of January 17th, while I was eating breakfast and thinking about my biology test, Kyle slipped into my room and made sure everything was in place. Then he went to our mother with tears in his eyes and told her that her youngest child had a terrible secret. She believes every word. Why wouldn't she? Kyle had spent 12 years being the perfect son, the responsible one, the one who never lied. And I had spent 12 years being painted as the difficult one, the outsider, the girl who just wasn't really part of the family. By the time I walked through that front door after school, my trial was already over. The verdict was guilty, and the sentence was exile. That's how I ended up on County Road 4 in a January blizzard, walking toward my uncle's house like it was the only light left in the world. But Kyle had made one mistake, one tiny error in his perfect plan. He didn't account for Frank Delgado. The thing about hypothermia is that you don't realize it's happening until it's almost too late. Your body starts shutting down piece by piece. Your brain gets foggy, and suddenly, sitting down for just a minute seems like the best idea in the world. Just a quick rest, just until you catch your breath. I made it 5 miles before my legs gave out. I'd left the main road, trying to cut through a wooded area, thinking it would be shorter. Stupid mistake. The snow was deeper there, the wind blocked by trees, but the cold somehow worse. Everything looked the same, white on white on white. I lost my sense of direction completely. There was a fallen log ahead. I remember thinking I'd just lean against it for a second, catch my breath. Uncle Marshall's house was only 4 more miles. I could make it. My knees buckled before I got there. The snow came up fast, and then everything went warm. That's the thing about freezing to death. After a while, it stops hurting. Your body gives up fighting, and everything gets warm and sleepy. That's when you know you're in real trouble. I remember thinking the snow looked comfortable, like a bed, like a white blanket someone had laid out just for me. I closed my eyes, just for a minute, just until the warmth stopped feeling so good. I don't know how long I was lying there. What I know is that Frank Delgado hadn't been driving home from his daughter's house that night. I would have died in that snow, and Kyle would have gotten away with everything. Frank Delgado was 62 years old, retired firefighter with 35 years of experience. He'd seen every kind of emergency, every kind of crisis, every kind of situation where minutes meant the difference between life and death. He knew exactly what he was looking at when his headlights caught something wrong in the snow near the tree line. He pulled over so fast his tires screamed against the ice. He had an emergency kit in his trunk, old habit from his firefighter days. Thermal blanket, hand warmers, first aid supplies. He found me face down in the snow, lips blue, barely breathing. Frank wrapped me up and called 911 while rubbing my hands between his, talking to me even though I couldn't respond. The ambulance took 18 minutes to arrive. 18 minutes of Frank Delgado refusing to let me die. Later, he told me he knew something was wrong beyond the hypothermia. A teenage girl alone in a blizzard with no coat and no phone? That wasn't an accident. That was something else entirely. At the hospital, they asked Frank if he knew my name. He checked my backpack, found my student ID, Jennifer Rice. The name clicked. His neighbor, 2 houses down, was Marshall Rice, family lawyer. Same last name, probably related. Frank made a phone call. Marshall Rice was 45 years old, my father's younger brother, and he had been waiting for this call for 4 years. Not this exact call, but a call. Garrett had made him promise to watch over me, and Marshall had kept his word from a distance, checking in when he could, making sure I was still standing. When Frank told him what happened, Marshall was in his car before the call ended. 40 minutes later, he walked into my hospital room like a man going to war. I was awake by then. Frostbite on 3 toes, IV in my arm, a CPS investigator and a police officer asking me questions I was too exhausted to answer. Marshall took one look at me, one look at them, and said 5 words that changed everything. I'm her lawyer and family. 3 hours after throwing her daughter into a blizzard, my mother's phone rang. The voice on the other end was cold and professional. Officer Hendricks with County Police. There had been an incident. Her daughter had been found unconscious in a wooded area. Hypothermia, frostbite. She was being transported to Fairview Hospital. And one more thing, ma'am. Child Protective Services has been notified. A caseworker is already on site. We have some questions about why a 16-year-old girl was walking alone in a blizzard with no coat and no phone. We're going to need you to come down to the hospital. My mother's face went pale. I know because the hospital staff told me later. They said she looks like a woman watching her whole life crumble in slow motion. Kyle was standing right next to her when she got that call, and for the first time, his perfect mask slipped, just for a second, but it was enough. Because here's the thing about that night, the thing that changed everything. Frank Delgado wasn't just some random retiree driving home. He was a man who had spent 35 years running toward emergencies while everyone else ran away. He knew how to ask the right questions. He knew how to spot when a story didn't add up. And he wasn't about to let a 16-year-old girl fall through the cracks. My brother thought he was getting rid of a problem that night, thought he was clearing the paths to my inheritance, protecting his future by destroying mine. But what he actually did was light a fuse, and he had no idea what was about to explode. Living with Uncle Marshall and Aunt Ellen was like learning to breathe again after years of holding my breath. Their house wasn't huge, 3 bedrooms, a kitchen that smelled like coffee and cinnamon, a backyard where their dog Murphy liked to chase squirrels, but it was warm, it was safe, and nobody there was plotting against me. The first morning I woke up in their guest room, I lay there for 10 minutes, waiting for something bad to happen, waiting for the other shoe to drop. When Ellen knocked on the door and asked if I wanted pancakes, I almost cried. Not because of the pancakes, because she'd knocked, because she'd asked, because she hadn't just barged in or yelled from downstairs or ignored me altogether. Marshall enrolled me in a new school where nobody knew my history. I made real friends for the first time, people who liked me for me, not because they'd been fed a story about who I was supposed to be. I joined the robotics club, discovered I was good at coding, started thinking about a future that didn't involve just surviving. Ellen taught me to bake cookies, her grandmother's recipe that she said she was passing down to me. Marshall taught me that adults could actually keep their promises. He came to my school events, every single one, just like my dad used to. He helped me with college applications. He told me he was proud of me, and he meant it. For the first time since my father died, I remembered what family was supposed to feel like. But the story wasn't over, not even close. The investigation changed everything. Detective Sandra Webb wasn't just a caseworker checking boxes. She was a 20-year veteran of crimes against children, and she didn't just look at evidence, she traced it. Every receipt, every timestamp, every thread. And the more she pulled, the more Kyle's perfect story unraveled. It started with the jewelry. The pearl necklace had been found in my dresser drawer. Open and shut case, right? Except when they dusted it for fingerprints, mine weren't on it. Not a single one. Kyle's were. He'd been careless, handled it without gloves, assuming nobody would bother to check. Then there were the online listings. The fake profiles Brittany created were traced back to an IP address, but it wasn't my computer. It was Kyle's laptop at Brittany's apartment. They'd used my email address but forgot that internet service providers keep records. The marijuana was traced to a purchase Kyle made at a dispensary in a neighboring state. Perfectly legal there, not legal to give to a minor in Minnesota. And Kyle paid with his debit card because of course he did. The text messages were the smoking gun. The timestamps showed they were sent at 3 in the morning. My phone's location data, which the police subpoenaed from the carrier, showed it was in my bedroom. But my school security system showed I had swiped into the building at 7:15 a.m. for early morning study hall. Nobody sends drug dealer texts at 3 a.m. and then shows up for voluntary study hall 4 hours later. If this story is hitting close to home, I hope you'll stick around because what happens next is worth every second. Drop a like if you're rooting for me. It means the world. A neighbor came forward too. Mrs. Patterson, who lived across the street, told Detective Webb she'd seen Kyle going into my room multiple times when I wasn't home. She thought it was strange, but didn't want to interfere in family business. After she heard what happened, she couldn't stay quiet anymore. But the real breakthrough came when Brittany cracked. Brittany Voss was 19 years old and terrified of prison. When Detective Webb showed her the evidence, showed her exactly how much trouble she was in, Brittany's loyalty to Kyle evaporated like snow in sunlight. She confessed everything: the planning sessions, the fake profiles she created, the jewelry Kyle gave her to photograph, the messages she sent from my phone while I slept. She even had text conversations with Kyle saved on her phone, messages where he laid out the entire plan in black and white. One message stuck with me when I read it in the court documents later. Kyle had written, "The little charity case doesn't deserve that money anyway. Dad always liked her better, but she's not even his real kid. This is just evening the score." Brittany recorded a phone call with Kyle after she agreed to cooperate. In that call, he admitted everything, laughed about how easy it had been, said our mother was so desperate to believe I was the problem that she didn't ask a single question. His exact words: "Mom wanted to get rid of her since Dad died. I just gave her an excuse." The court date was set for April 2012. Kyle was charged with fraud, falsifying evidence, endangerment of a minor, and attempted theft through deception. Brittany got a reduced sentence for cooperating, and my mother was called to testify about why she expelled a minor child into life-threatening conditions without verifying a single accusation. The courtroom was packed. Marshall sat on one side of me. Frank Delgado sat in the gallery, wearing the same flannel jacket he'd had on the night he saved my life. My mother sat alone, looking like she'd aged 10 years in 3 months, and Kyle sat with the public defender he'd met an hour before, finally looking like what he was, a scared young man whose lies had caught up with him. The evidence was presented systematically, professionally, devastatingly. Fingerprint analysis showing Kyle had handled the jewelry. IP records proving the fake listings came from his girlfriend's apartment. Dispensary records showing he'd purchased the marijuana. Phone data proving the texts were sent while I was asleep. And Brittany's recorded confession played for the entire courtroom to hear. When Kyle took the stand, he tried to maintain his story, tried to look confused and innocent. The prosecutor wasn't having it. "Mr. Rice," she said, holding up the fingerprint report, "can you explain why your fingerprints are on the necklace you claim your sister stole?" Kyle swallowed. "I must have touched it at some point. It's my grandmother's necklace, family heirloom." "And these text messages between you and Ms. Voss, where you discuss, and I quote, planting the stuff in her room, can you explain those?" That's taken out of context. The prosecutor played the recording. Kyle's own voice filled the courtroom, laughing about how easy it had been, calling me a charity case who didn't deserve our father's money. The color drained from his face. Then they called my mother. Patricia Rice took the stand looking like she wanted to disappear. She had to explain why she expelled her 16-year-old daughter into a blizzard without investigating the accusations, had to admit she never checked the evidence herself, never asked for my side of the story, never even hesitated before throwing me out. Judge Catherine Morrison had seen ugly cases before, but I think even she was disturbed by what she heard. "Mrs. Rice," the judge said, her voice sharp as ice, "you put a child into life-threatening conditions based on unverified accusations from your adult son? You made no attempt to investigate? You chose one child over another without evidence, without reason, without basic parental judgment. Your daughter nearly died. Do you understand the gravity of what you did?" My mother started crying. "I thought Kyle was telling the truth. He's my son. I trusted him." "You trusted your son and nearly killed your daughter," the judge replied. "That's not parenting. That's negligence at best, criminal endangerment at worst." Kyle's sentence came down hard. 3 years in state prison, 5 years probation after release, full restitution of all legal costs, permanent restraining order, and a felony conviction that would follow him forever. I stood up when the judge asked if the victim had anything to say. I looked at Kyle, then at my mother, then at the courtroom full of people who finally knew the truth. My father died when I was 12. He left me that money because he knew I would need it. He knew what you would try to do. He was the only person in that house who ever loved me, and you spent 4 years trying to steal the last thing he gave me. I hope you think about that every day for the rest of your life. Kyle didn't look at me, couldn't look at me. The golden sun had finally been exposed, and there was nowhere left to hide. My mother tried to approach me after the hearing. She reached toward me, tears streaming down her face, starting to say something about not knowing, about being deceived, about wanting to make things right. I stepped back. "You didn't ask. You didn't question anything. You didn't check if the fingerprints matched. You didn't wonder why your straight-A daughter would suddenly become a drug dealer. You chose to believe him because it was easier than loving me. You've been waiting to get rid of me since Dad died. Kyle just gave you the excuse you wanted." She tried to speak again, to explain, to justify. I held up my hand. "Dad knew. He knew what you would do. That's why he left the money to me and not you. That's why he called Marshall and asked him to watch over me. He saw who you really were, and he tried to protect me from you. The only thing I don't understand is why he stayed married to you." Patricia flinched like I'd slapped her. Maybe I had in a way, with words that were 13 years overdue. "You almost let me die," I said. "You threw me into a blizzard because your real son told you to, and now you want to make things right? There is no making this right. There's just living with what you did." I walked out of that courthouse with Marshall on one side and Frank Delgado on the other. The sun was shining on the snow, and for the first time in months, the cold didn't scare me anymore. That was 13 years ago. I'm 29 now, and my life looks nothing like I imagined when I was 16, walking through a blizzard with nothing but a school backpack and frozen sneakers. I live in Seattle. Beautiful apartment with a view of Puget Sound. Morning light that streams through windows I actually chose myself. I'm a software engineer at a tech company. Good salary, good benefits, good people. I worked my way up from an internship, and every promotion felt like another step away from who I used to be. And I'm engaged. His name is Marcus. He's a high school history teacher, which tells you pretty much everything you need to know about his heart. The man chose to spend his life helping teenagers understand that the past matters, that choices have consequences, that every generation inherits both the triumphs and the failures of the ones that came before. He believes in second chances and learning from mistakes and the power of education to change lives. We met at a charity event 3 years ago. I was there for work. He was there because he actually cared about the cause, some youth homelessness initiative that hit close to home for reasons he didn't know yet. He was wearing a blazer that was slightly too big and arguing passionately with someone about the importance of teaching primary sources. I thought he was ridiculous. And then I thought he was wonderful. On our third date, he asked me about the scar on my pinky toe, the one from the frostbite. I'd worn sandals without thinking about it. Most people politely ignore scars. Marcus noticed, so I told him the short version. The blizzard, the brother, the betrayal, the survival. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at me with these serious brown eyes and said, "I'm glad you survived. I'm really, really glad you survived." Nobody had ever said it quite like that before, not as a platitude or a conversation filler, like he actually meant it, like my survival mattered to him personally, even though he'd only known me for 3 weeks. We're getting married in June. Life is good. Life is really, genuinely, unbelievably good. Then the letter arrived. It came to Uncle Marshall's address. Marshall still lives in the same house, still sharp as ever at 58, still practicing law, still showing up every time I need him. He called me, said something had arrived that I needed to see. His voice was careful, neutral, the way he sounds when he's trying not to influence my decisions. I flew down that weekend. The envelope was cheap white paper, shaky handwriting I barely recognized. The return address was Minnesota Correctional Facility. Kyle was back in prison. I knew that already. After his first sentence, he'd gotten into cryptocurrency scams, built investors out of nearly $300,000. Federal charges this time. He's serving 5 years. I opened the letter at Marshall's kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold in my hands. "Dear Jennifer," it began, "I know I don't deserve to ask anything of you. I know you have every reason to throw this letter away without reading it, but I'm asking anyway because I've had a lot of time to think in here and I need to say this. I was wrong about everything, about you, about the money, about what I did. I told myself you weren't really family, that Dad choosing you meant he was rejecting me, that the money should have been mine. I was jealous and angry, and I turned you into the enemy because it was easier than admitting I was the problem. What I did to you was unforgivable. I know that. I nearly killed you. I spent years telling myself it wasn't that serious, that you would have been fine, that someone would have found you. But I know the truth. I left you to die in the snow because I wanted money that was never mine to begin with. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just needed you to know that I finally understand what I did, and I'm sorry for whatever that's worth now. Kyle." I sat there for a long time. The coffee got cold, the afternoon light shifted across the table. Marshall didn't say anything. He just waited, the way he always had, letting me find my own way. 13 years of silence. 13 years of building a life without them. Did I owe Kyle anything? No, I didn't. But I thought about my father. I thought about the kind of person he'd want me to become. I thought about carrying anger versus letting it go. I decided not to respond, not because I was angry, but because some bridges don't need to be rebuilt. Some connections were never real to begin with. Kyle's apology might be genuine. It might be another manipulation. After everything, I couldn't tell the difference, and I didn't owe him the effort of figuring it out. I put the letter in Marshall's shredder and watched it turn into confetti. As for my mother, her story didn't end well. After the trial, she lost most of her friends. Small towns talk, and everyone knew what Patricia Rice had done to her daughter. The story spread through Eden Prairie like wildfire. The woman who threw her kid into a blizzard. The mother who believed a lie without asking a single question. The parent who chose her golden son over her adopted daughter and nearly got the girl killed. She sold the house 6 months later, couldn't afford it anymore without Garrett's income, and couldn't stand the neighbor's stares. Moved to an apartment on the other side of town, the kind with thin walls and parking lots full of cars that have seen better days. Works as a cashier at a grocery store now. I heard she started going to church, trying to find redemption somewhere. She sent me 3 letters over the years. The first one came about a year after the trial. The second one arrived when I graduated college. The third one showed up last Christmas. I've never opened any of them. They sit in a drawer at Marshall's house, unopened, unanswered. Maybe someday I'll be curious enough to read them. Maybe I never will. I don't hate her anymore. Hate is heavy, and I've carried enough weight. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. Some people you forgive from a distance. Some people you forgive by never letting them close enough to hurt you again. My mother is both. At 21, I received my father's gift, $95,000, exactly as he intended. I used it for college tuition and a down payment on my first apartment. The last present from a man who loved me enough to protect me even after he was gone. I keep one photo on my desk now. It's from my 8th birthday. Dad and me at the lake holding up the fish we'd caught together. He's got his arm around me and we're both laughing at something I don't remember anymore. On the back, in his handwriting, it says, "My girl." Uncle Marshall and Aunt Ellen are walking me down the aisle at the wedding, both of them together. Frank Delgado is on the guest list, too. He's 75 now, still sharp, still telling anyone who'll listen about the night he found a frozen girl in the snow and helped give her a second chance at life. My father left me money, but that wasn't his real gift. His real gift was making sure I'd find my way to Marshall if anything happened. He knew I'd need a family that actually wanted me. He knew before I did that blood doesn't make someone family. Choice does. I think about that January night sometimes, standing on that porch in the cold, watching the door close, feeling like the world had ended. In a way, it had. The world I knew, the family I thought I had, the life I was living, all of it ended in that moment. But here's what I've learned since then. Some storms don't destroy you. They redirect you. They push you toward the life you were supposed to have all along. That blizzard nearly killed me, but it also set me free. Thank you so much for watching. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, have you ever found family in unexpected places? I read every single one. See you in the next video.